Okay, hi guys, this is my first attempt at flipping the class, and this is my first time using iMovie, so we'll see how this goes. If I make mistakes, feel free to laugh, but that's okay. This lesson is 3.5, which is proportions and similar figures, and if you hear something rumbling, that's an airplane going above. There's 5 target points, corresponding angles and sides, finding the length of a side by using proportions, dilation and scale factors, using similarities in word problems, and scale drawings and map distances. So the first part is going to be corresponding sides and angles, or angles and sides. When you have similar figures, they're going to be the same shape but different sizes. So you can see this one is smaller and this one is bigger, but it's in the same size. They're similar. In similar figures, the corresponding angles are congruent, and then the corresponding sides are going to be proportional. So in this case, the book will say, identify your corresponding angles and sides. I tried to color code it for you so you can see as easy as possible. So in this case, angle A is corresponding to angle X. You can see the red in red. Angle B in green is corresponding to angle Y. And angle C is corresponding to angle Z. And that's in blue. So those are your corresponding angles. And they are congruent, which means they're equal. Okay. For the sides, AB is congruent to XY, and I tried to color coordinate it so you can see. If it goes from AB, it would be XY. You could go BA, but then it'd be corresponding to YX. So it goes in the same order. Okay? And then I got BC is congruent to YZ. And then I got CA is congruent to ZX. And again, if I went AC, I could see it's congruent to XZ. Those are your corresponding angles and your corresponding sides. Okay. So number 2, target point number 2 is finding the length of a side using proportions. Okay. And in this case, again, similar figures, so now the sides are going to be proportionate. Over here you have an 8, 10, and a 12, and over here you have 12, M, and an N. Okay. So in this case, we're going to use a proportion to find the length of M. There's different ways of setting up your proportions. So I did 3 different ones that you can use. You can use any one of the 3. Actually, there's 4, but I just put 3 here. Okay. So in this case, if I put 8 is to 10, or 8 over 10, so from left to right, my proportion would be 8 over 10 is equal to 12 over M. So I could go 12 over M. Okay. If I went 8 over 12, which we're not using this 12, we're using this 12. So left side over left side, I would go left side over left side is equal to right side over right side, 10 over M. Okay. Another way I could go is actually if I went from this side, if I went M over 12, so right over left, would equal to 10 over 8. So you can see how they correspond and they work. Now when I have a proportion, I cross multiply. So when I cross multiply, I get 8M is equal to 120. In this case, I would still get 8M is equal to 120. In this case, I would still go 8M is equal to 120. So you can see, even though I set up my proportion in 3 different ways, when I cross multiply, I get the same product and the same equation. Now I can solve by dividing by 8. One thing you will never use is uncorresponding sides. So I will never go 8 and N. They don't correspond in any way. Okay, or 8 and 12 to find M, because M and 12 don't correspond in any way. Okay, so when I do this, I just divide this one by 8, divide it by 8, and I get M is equal to 120 divided by 8 is 15. And so M is going to equal to 15, which would make sense because you have to use some common sense. If 12 is bigger than 8, then this side should be bigger than 10. Okay, if it came out something smaller, you know you did something wrong. Okay, so that's how you use a proportion to find a side. I have 2 homework checks for you. So homework check number 1, and this is to show that you did the video. So you need to have the 2 homework checks done prior to coming into class and show it to me before you come into class. Okay, it's just 2 simple problems. After watching the video, you can solve this. Homework check number 1 is using a proportion. I want you to find N. Okay, so I have the proportions for M here. I just want you to write a proportion like this, solve it for N. Okay, That's homework check number 1. So number 3 is going to be dilations and scale factors. For dilations and scale factors, dilation is just making a picture bigger or smaller, like if I use the Elmo and I zoom in and zoom out. That's a dilation. Dilations are according to the scale factor. If your scale factor equals 1, so I'm going to put it here, if your scale factors equal 1, you have the same image. Okay? If your scale factor is greater than 1, like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you get a larger image. It multiplies by that much bigger. Okay? I want you to think, what kind of scale factor would give you a smaller image? Okay? If you said less than 1, you are correct. Okay? But it has to be a fraction. So it cannot be -1. So I'm sorry, it should be between 0 and 1. So the correct answer would be between 0 and 1, and it'd be a fraction or a decimal. Okay, that would make it smaller, but not a negative number. Okay, so in this case, if the center of dilation is the origin, which means it expands from the origin outwards. If this is these are my 4 coordinates of A, B, C, and D, and my scale factor is 3, and I said to find the new coordinates. All you do is multiply every coordinate by the scale factor. So 2 times 3, 3 times 3, 4 times 3, etc. The way you would write it is with a little prime mark or a tick mark. So if the old one is A, the new one is going to be A prime, and you multiply this by 3, and you get 6, and this by 3, and you get 9. For B prime, I multiply 4 times 3, and I get 12, and 3 times 6 is 18. For C prime, it's going to be -12, comma 18. And for D prime, it's going to be -6, comma 9. So you just multiply each one of these numbers by the scale factors. So real quickly, if I have another one where my scale factor is 1/2, which means my new picture is going to be smaller than the old picture, I just multiply each one of these by 1/2. So A prime would be 1, comma 1.5. B prime would be 2, comma 3, because half of 4 and half of 6. C prime, that would be a -2 and 3. And then D prime, -2 divided by 1/2 is -1, and 3 divided by 1/2 is still 1.5. 3 over 2, which is 1.5. So again, dilation makes it go bigger or smaller according to the scale factor. If the scale factor is larger than 1, you're going to get a bigger picture, so you can already see these numbers are bigger than that. If your scale factor is less than 1, but between 0 and 1, which is a fraction, your numbers get smaller, and your picture gets smaller, your dilation gets smaller. And all you do is multiply each one of these coordinates by the scale factor to get that. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4, using similarities in word problems. A flagpole casts a shadow 102 feet long. Cavelu is 6 feet tall and has a 17-foot shadow. How tall is the flagpole? So all you do is you draw a picture, and you can see I have right triangles, and fill in the according units. So if the shadow of the flagpole is 102 feet long, okay, Cavelu is 6 feet tall, it says, and his shadow is 17 feet. And how tall is the flagpole? So all you do is draw pictures, and now we use the same corresponding sides. So I can do different proportions. So I could go 6 over 17, which is his height over shadow, is equal to the height over shadow, x over 102. Or I could go height over height, which is 6 over x, is equal to, so I went Cavelu over the flagpole, 17 over 102. Okay. And there's different ways, again, that you could do it. I'm just going to show these two, for example. And when I cross multiply, I'm going to get 17x is equal to 612. If I did it this way, I would still get 17x is equal to 612. So again, either way it would have worked out. I divide both sides by 17. I'm just going to solve one of them. Divide both sides by 17, and x is going to equal to 36 feet. And so what this is saying is this flagpole is 36 feet. Okay, so that's how you use a proportion. Just draw a picture. The shadow will always be on the ground. Okay, the height will always be on the right side. the height of whatever, if it's a person, flagpole, or tree. Okay, so that's how you solve word problems using similarities. You just draw the picture, draw similar pictures, use a proportion, set up your proportion, cross multiply, solve it, and you get your answer. And again, just double check. If this is a longer shadow than this, then this should be taller than this, which is true. Okay? So the last one is going to be scale drawings and map distances. Okay? In this case, if I said the map distance, the scale on a map is 1 inch equals 200 miles. Okay, so 1 inch on a map is going to equal to 200 miles. If Honolulu to Samoa is 2,600 miles, how many inches on the map is it? Okay, so in real life, if it's 2,600 miles on a map, how many inches is it going to be? So again, you set up a proportion. Always, whenever you have a scale, use this. That should be your first ratio or fraction of your proportion. And notice I used the units, 1 inch over 200 miles. Okay, I want you to do that. Put the inches over the miles. Now when I look here, they give me the 2,600 miles, so I know to line it up with the miles here. And that's why you want to use units. And then it says how many inches? So it's x inches. So if you use units, it'll help you line up this proportion better and easier. Okay? And all I do is cross multiply. So 200x is equal to, and when I do this, I get 2,600. Divide both sides by 200. That cancels out. X is equal to, and a simple way is, again, take out a 0 and a 0. So I'm left with 26 divided by 2, which is 13. And I was looking for inches, so 13 inches. Okay. So on a map, 13 inches equals to 2,600 miles. Okay. So homework check number 2 is going to be this. Using the same scale, 1 inch equals to 200 miles. Okay. So using the same scale and my proportion I have here. So again, you're going to use the same part here. Homework check number 2. Using the same scale, if Hawaii is 19.25 inches away from Japan on a map, what is the actual distance? So on a map, it's 19.25 inches. What is the actual distance in miles? Set up your proportion, solve it out, and come to class with this done. So you should have 2 homework check done before class starts, and that's to see whether or not you did this homework. Okay? I know this video is about 13 minutes long. I think that's better than the 30 or 45 minutes or even an hour from the homework. So I hope this helps. Take care, and I'll see you in class.